economic data tomorrow. How
Wait,
about
official
that?
data?
Official data.
No.
So it's coming from
I'm glad you were listening to my report just now.
Exactly. Don't get the CPI data.
I'm trying to drum up the drama.
And we're trying to just, see where we are on inflation front and how that might impact the Fed and all that type of stuff. So we'll take it what we can get at this point. Shana Sissel, she's president and CEO of Banríon Capital Management, joining us here. Shana, again, we're going to get a piece of inflation data tomorrow. Are you going to pay much attention to it? Do you feel like the Fed is kind of on track to continue to lower rates? How do you think about that?
No, I am going to pay attention to it. I'm a little concerned it may be distorted because it's not being, they brought people back in during the government shutdown to ask them to calculate this. So it's not being done as part of normal business operations, and it's coming out a little later than expected. So, those things make me a little concerned that there might be some distortions in the numbers, but I am paying attention to it because the last few readings have shown that inflation is ticking higher. So if you look at inflation versus, a year ago, it's higher than it was a year ago. And that's concerning because the Fed has a dual mandate. It's the labor markets and it's inflation. And the labor markets are definitely showing some signs of weakness, but nothing that's tangible enough that I think the Fed can say, whoa, this is very concerning. But inflation is ticking up, and they've been really, really focused on trying to keep that number around 2%, and they were moving in the right direction for a while. So the uptick in inflation, I think, is concerning. I don't know that it will affect their decision this month, but I do think it puts the December meeting in question on whether or not they will cut then.
Okay, so the Fed is in a blackout period right now. They're not speaking at all before the decision next Wednesday, and pretty much a rate cut is not in doubt for next week. If there's still no data, by the time this FOMC meeting comes around next Wednesday, what does Jay Powell talk about when he says this is a data-dependent Fed?
Well, I think it's naive to suggest that the Fed doesn't have some insight into what's going on. Like, they might not have publicly calculated data that they're putting out as they normally do, but they are almost certainly getting data from the states and areas of the areas that are not necessarily impacted by the government shutdown. So they have some idea of what's going on, and they're going to be looking at the inputs in the inflation data. So it's not as if they're completely flying blind here. Obviously, it would be better if the government was open and that everything was working smoothly. But at the same time, I do think that they have some information. There are plenty of private market data points that they can touch on that may give them a glimpse of what's going on, whether it be ADP or something to that extent in terms of labor markets. So they're not completely flying blind. I expect that Chairman Powell will kind of continue the same talking points as it pertains to inflation and labor markets. He just might be referencing some private economic data resources instead of the publicly available government calculated ones.
Shana, we're kind of right into the teeth of earnings so far. What have been your takeaways? What do you think maybe the street needs to hear from corporate America?
So I think my takeaway on earnings is they've been better than expected. That I think is largely a result of many executives at corporations, when they gave previous guidance, were doing so with some trepidation as it relates to how tariffs might impact their business, and the uncertainty surrounding that made them more conservative in their guidance. And then tariff policy maybe didn't impact their business to the extent that they expected, which allowed them to beat earnings. I like to say that they wanted to underpromise and overdeliver as much as possible. So I think there's a lot of that going on. I think what the street wants to hear is more insight into labor, application of AI. I know Amazon has talked about the implementation of AI to create efficiencies and how that might impact workforce. I think that's a broad trend. So I think the street's really looking for insight into what's going to happen in 2026. Growth slowing down, AI, monetization, things of that nature, I think are the key focuses for analysts and the street as they look forward into next year.
All right, that sounds like a good place to leave it. Shana, thank you so much. Shana Sissel is president and CEO of Banríon